Anyway, thank you everybody. With that, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Todd Bryant with ToddBryant.dev, or
Coaching.
.dev.
Yeah, it's ToddBryant.dev is the website.
All right. Anyway, he is a serial entrepreneur, had a career, and it took him through Nelnet and some other LinkedIn businesses. So with that, I'm going to let him tell his story, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Is my mic working okay? Can everybody hear me all right? All right, good. So as you know, my name's Todd Bryant. I am currently coaching small businesses and startups here in town. My history, I've worked in a lot of different industries, a lot of different areas. My family owned a restaurant growing up. I worked there. I've worked in a small mom and pop service shop where it was 2 owners and 2 employees. I've worked in the software industry, and have worked in businesses that were losing $200,000 a year, and the latest one was revenues in, well, over 10 million probably a year. I'm currently retired. My last stint was as a director of software development for Nelnet here in town. I was responsible for their higher ed suite of products. I had probably 6 different products underneath of me in teams ranging from 3 or 4 to about 25 individuals. Those products varied from the startup early stage, still trying to find product market fit, to established products that were close to 15 years old. So I've seen the challenges from the different life cycles of the businesses, and I retired from that a couple of years ago. We have a couple small children, we have enough savings. I thought it'd be a good idea to take some of that time off and be able to manage that precious time with the kids that goes so quickly, and it's been good to keep the stress levels down in my family, but I'm getting itchy. I have an itch to kind of get back into it a little bit, and I thought I would want to leverage my experience and help small businesses and startups that are just starting their journey. So here I am. I'm also the husband of Janine Bryant. He stole my thunder a little bit, but she owns Changing Spaces. She's an alum of the Focus Suites. It's been over 10 years now, I believe. They're quite successful, but the challenges never stop, right? I mean, that's part of business. They keep going, they just change. It gets different. So I've enjoyed helping with that, though it's her baby. I'm not going to take any credit for the success of them necessarily. She's done such a good job. She's going to be here in a couple weeks, so I would urge you to come listen to her speech. She does have a new business venture. I guess it's really the same kind of thing. She's wrote a book, Easy Right Sizing. She's trying to expand. Again, she loves what she does just like I do, and she's doing it because she wants to help people. And she's done a great job in Lincoln, but Lincoln's only so big, so she wants to try to expand, right, and bring that message. So she's got YouTube videos out, which I get the privilege of editing and putting up on that. What I get for having a tech background, I guess, and being retired. But today I just wanted to talk about a few things that I see small businesses and startups struggle with. Probably the first one would be scaling too soon. I see a lot of people entrepreneurs that they're doing a startup. They come from industry, right? They're experienced. They're a successful individual at whatever it is that they were doing, and they're going to strike out on their own, and they're going to take off that way. So the challenges that come with that is they've probably been working in a very successful business, and they see tools and the processes, and they know what staff they need and what challenges they'll have when they're successful. So they start tackling those problems right away. The problem with that is until you are successful, until you've nailed your product to market fit, and you've got your pricing structure down, and you know how you're acquiring your customers, those other things are just distraction, right? how you manage your customers, if you have a customer relations tool or accounting software or hiring even individuals prematurely because you know you're going to need them eventually, those things keep you from focusing on the things that are most important, which is, again, finding your product market fit. That's not a given, and sometimes people take it as a given that that's going to be successful, and it's also the harder problem to solve, quite frankly. It's poorly defined sometimes. So knowing that they're going to need accounting software and focusing their time on that gives them a sense of accomplishment and purpose. The second problem that I see, it's really common once you've gotten to the point where you've found product market fit and your pricing and you've got customers, is not scaling soon enough, right? So you've got processes in place and they may be held together with duct tape and baling wire, and it's worked for you. It's not perfect, but you know the advantages and disadvantages of it. And but once you have customers knocking down your door asking for your product or your service, and you've tripled the number of customers that you're servicing, revenue's gone up, those things start to show their strain, right? Balls start getting dropped. Customers don't get called back, or facts get lost. And people will go a surprisingly long time with that before they address the problem. Usually it takes till they get a crisis. Crisis happens, then they start to address the issues. The key is to identify those problems 6 to 12 months before they become a problem, right? And that's always easier said than done because you're busy working on whatever it is that you do. You've got a service, you're building a product, whatever it is. You're so busy on that, you have so many customers, you're not stepping back and thinking about what challenges is my business, which is really a different problem, right? You're trying to solve a market problem, but your business also has individual issues. So you have to think about those things in tandem. You're the CEO, you're the owner, you're the one that's going to have to do that. Because change is constant, change never stops. And both positive and negative changes happen, right? Customer growth, hiring new people, you lose somebody, a key individual, you have to hire somebody new, it's change. They're not machines, so every new person that comes in is going to have different challenges, different strengths, different weaknesses, right? The next problem that I see that people struggle with is pricing. You're probably not charging enough. Once you're successful, right? What is that? But once you've defined, you've got customers coming in the door, you need cash. Cash makes everything better, and cash, it's not the only thing that solves the change problem, the scaling problem, but it is a very useful tool and it gives you options, right? When you're new and you're a startup, you shouldn't be charging a lot. You want to charge appropriately. You're still, again, trying to figure out how to get people in. You want to use that as a lever to get people to buy. But once you've got your business down, you know what you're providing, you know it's of value, you're better than the other startup, right? You're established now. This other person's still trying to figure things out, but you potentially know what you're doing. You know what your value add is. You need to raise prices and you need to charge appropriately. It allows you to scale. If you're always in a cash crunch, then you're not going to be able to do the things that you need to do to make sure your business is thriving and growing. So you should always be revisiting what your pricing structure is. And again, I know that's scary. A lot of people don't want to raise prices. They think that you're going to scare off customers, and quite frankly, you will. Some customers will stop buying from you, and that's okay, because pricing's a funny thing. It's actually a marketing signal as well, and some people will stop buying, but some people will start buying when you raise your prices, and it signals to them a certain quality of your product or your service. So don't be afraid to do it. You can always revert it back. Say it's catastrophe. You do it, everybody stops buying. Well, it's not the end of the world. You can always lower your prices again. All you'll lose is a little bit of face, but you're okay with that, right? I mean, you went into this anyway as an entrepreneur. You're gonna have to be a little bit comfortable with failing until you succeed, right? So probably the last thing that I wanted to talk about today, and arguably the biggest problem that I see small businesses get into when they're successful, they're making a living at it, right, is defining what goals you want for your business. What do you want your business to be? How do you want it to be structured? And if you're like most people, you want to do things like take vacations, right? You want to be able to potentially spread the stress of owning a business across multiple people. You want not you to be the only one that cares about when things go right. And just as importantly, you probably want to retire someday, right? You want to be able to either run the business passively and have passive income, right? But you have people taking care of it that you trust. Or you want to sell the business. You want to sell it to somebody and be able to recoup all that hard work you put into it and get a nest egg back, right? Because this is an asset that you're growing. The problem with that is if you're the sole decision maker, if you're the only person that's responsible for making the hard decisions, you can't take a vacation, but most importantly, you are the business, right? And there's a certain ego to that, right? I get that. You built this from scratch, and a lot of people, their identities are the business. I mean, the business is them. They're one and the same. And there's a certain psychology involved with making it purposefully, making decisions that make you not important to the business, right? To the functioning of the business. You want to set it up so that you're not required to be there to make every single decision. And you have to be deliberate about it or it doesn't happen. So it has to be one of the goals, and it has to be one of the things that you stop and you think about regularly. And there are certain things that you can do. It's about putting processes in place and hiring the right people and empowering those people to make decisions. There's a whole psychology that goes into that. And you have to be aware of your own proclivities and your own weaknesses, quite frankly, because we all have strengths and weaknesses, so that you minimize your weaknesses and maximize your strengths. So, having said that, again, I'm doing this mainly right now because I feel like I have a lot of experience from a lot of different areas. I've seen so many challenges, and I'm not doing it to make a ton of money. I'm doing it mostly to give back to the community, right? I want to see other people be successful. I've seen my wife grow her business, and it's, you know, there's been happiness and tears, and there's been crises, and it's just, and it's been so fun in a while. If you take a step back and you stop taking it so personally, it really is fun to accomplish that, right? Accomplish growing something and making something that lives outside of yourself. So I have some cards up here. If anybody has any desire to talk, my initial consultation is free. I don't even charge very much if we go down that road. So again, it's more of just wanting to give back. I heard of a mentorship program that I want to potentially get into as well. And I'm also a coach so the Rakes Design Studio at the UNL has a technology organization where they do their capstone project is the students form groups and they go to local businesses and they actually do projects for businesses. The businesses pay for that, but the students have no experience. So it's all about getting them business experience in the real world. And I've been a sponsor for that and a business before, and now I'm a coach. It's an unpaid position. I'm a coach. I'm currently working with Huddle, their team this year, if anybody knows what that is. So I'm gives the coaches an interesting position because they're not related to the sponsors, so they don't have a conflict of interest with, and I'm also not related with the university, so I don't have, the students don't have to worry about what I have to say. They can ignore me if they want to. I don't play towards their grade necessarily, but it's a super fulfilling position and a thing to do, so I really enjoy it. I've done that several years now. But having said that, does anybody have any questions on anything?
Got a question. Have you encountered during your career or your coaching, have you encountered any one single book that you would refer people to also that want to grow a business?
That's a great question. There is no single book that I could recommend. I know that you've done the E-Myth book I haven't read it directly. I am familiar with it though, and I think it has a great message as well. I think it echoes a lot of what I've probably said today. For my own credit, I came up with that information on my own necessarily, but it just goes to show you though that great ideas are not necessarily by one person, right? They just make sense over time. But I am a little wary of books sometimes. I love learning, so I consume information. I love reading, but when you read books about certain processes or tools that you can use, sometimes they can be a panacea and make you think that if I just follow this, I'll be successful. My experience, I've done a ton of them in different areas, different businesses. My experience is that rarely do those processes map directly to your business. It gives a person first a sense of hope and then a sense of dread that they don't know what they're doing when they can't figure it out. And quite frankly, and then when you ask somebody or you tell a coach who's pushing that type of thing, why isn't it working? Their answer is, well, you're doing it wrong. Well, and that's not very helpful. So I tend to focus on the fundamentals. I go back to like the goals. What is it you're trying to achieve? And what do you need to do, and work from the ground up, and then you put processes in place. And it could be something out of a book, but rarely it's pieces of something. So that's kind of a long answer to your question about books, but I am a little wary of those. Sometimes they can be, I like the books like E-Myth that talk about the fundamentals, focus on here's what you want to do rather than here's a way to accomplish it. Yes.
When you're coaching someone, how do you navigate a situation where that person you're coaching is skeptical or leery of change that would be beneficial for their business?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Again, for me, it's about focusing on what do you want to accomplish. And people resist, some people especially really resist change. They hate it at all costs, they don't want to do it. And change is an opportunity to get things better. You also don't want change for change's sake, right? So the first is trying to get them to understand you're not asking them to change just because whatever. You have their best interest in heart. That you realize that if you're constantly changing, then you're not necessarily focusing on, because change has an overhead, right? When you're changing, there's a lack of efficiency, right? Until you figure out what it is that you're doing, there's loss of time and money in doing that. So if you change cavalierly, then you're finding you're constantly in a place of lost efficiency and lost cash, right? So you have to be a good steward of the business and only change when change is necessary. But when it's necessary, right? If things are falling apart, then you need to change, and you need to wrap your head around that, and you need to move towards it, or things will always stay the same. And that's really the biggest one. If you're not happy with the way things are, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got, right? Some people can get past that, and some people can't, quite frankly. Did I see another question over here?
That breaks, like, so how does one get into the, I've been really intrigued, like, finding either intern or partners to help us go to a different direction, let's say, or an extension. Do you have suggestions for how to get into that? Like what you're talking about at breaks, that might be really exclusive, I don't know, that's my question, if I'm saying it correctly.
For looking for interns and whatnot?
Or like with the partnership you're doing with Huddle, they must be taking advantage of these brilliant kids at breaks.
Sure.
Okay, so how does that happen?
So yeah, Huddle, I know specifically, but a lot of tech businesses here in town, they use the sponsorship as a potential recruitment tool, right? To get they look for, that gives you a long period of time to evaluate particular students and make offers to them and see if they want to come on board. It's not cheap. So the RAKES program, the last I heard, businesses have to pay $50,000 for a semester project. It's like a 6-month project for the students to come in. That doesn't make sense unless you're doing it for the humanitarian reasons as well as that. So companies like Nelnet can get away with it. Huddle, who's flush with cash from investments, can get away with it, but most small businesses would not be able to. However, having said that, being a coach in an unpaid position, I don't pay anything, they don't pay me, but I also get that exposure to those types of individuals, and it allows me to have some influence and at least some ability to look for candidates. That doesn't help me now, being retired, but it did help me when I was in industry as well. Outside of that, they do have their events where they do it's like the hiring, the business event, you know what I mean, where you can come in and pitch essentially your company, and I think that's free, but you have to be privy to when it is, and so I don't even know when it is, quite honestly, this time. Yes?
You spoke earlier about positioning a business for sale or reselling. Say a little bit about maybe your philosophy on the right way to succession business.
So, can I have you repeat that one more time?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You talked about positioning your business to want to sell it.
Right.
Say a little bit more about your approach on how one might succession their business to make it a success.
Okay. That's such a great question. It never has the same answer, right, for every business. Yeah, again, that's the biggest, the hardest problem to solve, and the one you need to be thinking about all the time is where do I want my business to be, so that say you want to sell it, you want to exit someday, and make it attractive. To make it attractive to other individuals, it needs to be structured so that somebody that doesn't know anything about your business potentially can step in and learn without the business tanking, or potentially the business will run without them, right? So they're an owner and they provide capital or whatever. It can take 10 years to structure your business to do that, which is why once you get past the stage where you've found product to market fit and you have money coming in the door, you need to start thinking about that. Every decision you make, when you're dealing with change and dealing with problems that arise, there's two ways to solve it. There's the short-term way and there's the long-term way. And there's no good answer, but let me give you an example. So if you're the only person that's capable of making decisions and when it comes to dealing with customers and doing the marketing or dealing with accounting, then you're only going to be able to scale so much, right? You can't do that all the time. You'll find yourself working 80 hours a week, and your decisions will be of questionable quality, quite frankly. But most importantly, the people you have working for you learn that they can't make decisions, so they stop making decisions, and they wait for you to make the decision, which frustrates the hell out of you, because what you really want is them to make a decision, but you've trained them not to, right? By not letting them, or they make a decision and you counteract that decision, maybe in the short term, for the right reasons. You realize they made the wrong decision, but we're gonna switch it or whatever, we're gonna change it. But next time they won't make a decision anymore. Having staff that you trust and you empower and that you allow to own their little area and not countermand their decisions all the time is critical for you to be able to build the business and have it run. When you're in the startup stage, it's not something you need to worry about. But when you're 10 years in, well, hopefully before then, and you've got staff, it could be 3 people, it could be 25 people, you need to structure it in such a way that people outside of you are making the decisions on how things run, and you might not even know how to do it anymore, frankly. You knew how to do it when you were small and you were whatever, but when you're larger and you have somebody doing that for you, it's okay for you not to know. And that's scary because, again, it goes back to the psychology of your business is your identity a lot of times, and you're giving up that identity. And that is a self-sabotage. People will self-sabotage and not allow the business to scale because of that reason, and they don't even realize they're doing it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, yeah, I've had the opportunity to work with some businesses on succession, and entrepreneurs by nature want, it's their baby. To your
Yeah.
point about wanting to scale away from, there's a great book, and there's one you can pull from. It's called The Speed of Trust.
Okay.
I don't know if you've read that.
I haven't.
Yeah, I did too.
I have not,
Oh,
no.
I have not. It's a great piece to build into that. And to what you were just saying, allowing your people to make decisions and allowing them to succeed, even if they do it differently, or
Right.
allowing them to maybe even fail.
Right, absolutely.
To build that transition.
That's such a good point, is allowing them to fail. And that's the hard part, is you have to allow them. Now, what you should be doing is hiring good people that you trust, right? They have similar values to you. They're probably not going to be as good at everything, or they probably don't make decisions as well as you, right? Everybody thinks they make the best decisions. But there's a reason they're an employee and not an entrepreneur on their own, right? But that doesn't mean that they make bad decisions or they're a bad person or they're stupid, right? And that's where you hire them for their values, so they have similar values, so that when there's a crisis situation, at least there's a chance they're going to make a similar decision that you would make. They won't make the same decision. It may be a degree of right, but you have to let them make that decision and support them when they do it. You coach them afterwards on how did it go, here's maybe what I would have done, you did a great job, because you've hired them again, you trust them, you know they want to do a good job. Let them own it, and they will do a good job. That's a tough one. I see businesses of all sizes struggle with that, from, again, mom and pop shops with an entrepreneur to where the entrepreneur is gone. You're at Nelnet, something like that, which has got a business structure that's quite complex. They have many different business layers inside there, and it's endemic throughout. It's the single the biggest problem that I see at every business.
I have one more question, no one else says.
Nope.
So you said a key thing right now, when it doesn't matter if it's an owner or a manager, if you're a leader, I mean, if you look at the military, I mean, if you're under the captain rules, right?
Right.
So how do you recommend in your business coaching, when you've got a leader that's holding you back, they're not performing, an employee can live up to that ego, right? And not allow people or departments to bloom.
Right.
I know that's a loaded question, but how do you attack that?
Well, I'm a big believer in letting people go when it's clear it's not working out, right? You have to be able to restructure. You have to give it to yourself, and it's tough, right? Nobody wants to deliver bad news. But when you've come to the conclusion, it's kind of like you asked about change. How do you know when change is needed? Well, that's the thing, is when you're a smart person, right? And you kid yourself for as long as you can, but when somebody's clear that they have a pattern of behavior of doing something, they just don't get it, they don't have the same values as you as a manager, and their team's performance is suffering, you have a very frank conversation with them. They give them the ability, don't tell them how to do it again. You want to provide them the same thing. Tell them what you expect out of them. Give them a chance to change. Tell them you'll help them, you'll coach them. But their attitude is very important. If they're not there, if they're clear they're not going to change, they may say one thing to your face, but then you see from their actions that it's time. It's time to, you got to move on. And it doesn't have to be dramatic, or there doesn't have to be malice in that. It's just not working. The fit is not there. They'd be happier clearly somewhere else as well, because they're getting a lot of scrutiny from you, right? You move somebody out, you get somebody else in, you look for those values, you look for attitude, put them in position, and then you're going to step back, right? They don't know anything about it, and they're not going to perform as well as that person that was probably in that position for a while. But since you've hired for potential, eventually, if you do this enough time with everybody, eventually the level of performance of the organization rises to where you're not having a crisis all the time with everybody, and you can devote time as a leader. That's the thing, as a leader, you're not doing any of the work, right? You're evaluating everybody else and helping them facilitate their work, but your one big power is who you hire. You can't do the job anymore, but you can figure out who's going to do it for you. That help? Yeah.
What's your best failure?
My best failure, well, that's a loaded. So one that comes to mind is a managing position. I had a management position. Was it my first? If it wasn't my first, it was one of my first. I think it was my first. I was a team lead, became a team lead for a group of programmers. So I felt was a very good programmer. I performed very highly. I was able to create code quickly that was bug-free. And often what happens when you have an individual like that, they get promoted, right? And you've probably heard the horror stories. That's a lot of times it doesn't work out. And it didn't work out for me at that first time. I continued to program, and I thought everybody else would be as driven underneath me as I was, and didn't provide enough guidance, structure, or feedback for them to succeed. I also countermanded a lot of decisions. I micromanaged, and I ended up exactly with the situation I was talking about before. I found they had no motivation. They didn't want to make any decisions, because when they did, I told them why that decision was wrong. And I ended up doing most of the work on the team, and I was very frustrated. At first, in the heat of the moment, I was very frustrated that people weren't as good as I was, right? I was just, these people suck, and quite frankly, none of them did. They were very bright individuals, but I did not structure the team and give them the feedback that they needed to be successful. And it was only till sometime later that I reflected upon that and realized why it was. So I can't say that anybody's immune. I'm certainly not. But I can say that I learned a lot from it. Does that qualify?
Yep.
Good.
All right, well, Todd, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And as a thank you, we want to give you a Focus Suite mug to take with you.
I've been wanting one of these. I saw these the other day when I came, and I asked you if I could have one. You're like, no.
No.
We only give those to people that speak. I'm like, all right, well, I'll get
Top
one.
secret, so- Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing the donuts this morning.
Yep.
Please join us next week for Sherry Tafoya, and please hang around as long as you like. There's no need to run off. Meet somebody new before you leave, exchange business cards, or come up and ask Todd more questions and grab one of his business cards. So thanks again for being here. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, looking for mentors.